I 35F, never thought I'd be here, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet, but I'm at my wit's end and could really use some advice. I'm a single mom to an amazing 7-year-old boy, and our lives were turned upside down a year ago when my ex-husband, 37M, and I got divorced. It's been a roller coaster of emotions and challenges, and just when I thought things were starting to stabilize, a new twist has me questioning everything. Let me start from the beginning. My ex and I met in college. He was the charming, ambitious business major, and I was the dedicated pre-law student. We fell hard and fast, bonding over late-night study sessions and dreams of changing the world. After graduation, we got married and settled into our careers. He started his own tech company, which took off like a rocket, while I landed a position at a prestigious law firm. For years, everything seemed perfect. We had our son, bought a beautiful house in the suburbs, and were living the American dream. I scaled back my work hours to spend more time with our child, but I was still passionate about my career. My ex was supportive, or so I thought, always encouraging me to pursue my ambitions. But then, about a year and a half ago, things started to change. My ex became distant, working longer hours and coming home later. At first, I chalked it up to stress from his growing company. I tried to be understanding, picking up more of the slack at home and with our son. I thought if I could just be the perfect wife and mother, things would go back to normal. Then came that fateful day. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and I had just returned from taking our son to his soccer practice. I walked into the house, calling out to my husband, only to find him sitting in the living room, a grim expression on his face and a manila envelope in his hands. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold and distant. My heart sank. I knew something was terribly wrong. I sat down across from him, my hands shaking as he slid the envelope across the coffee table. "Open it," he said. With trembling fingers, I pulled out the contents, several glossy photographs that made my blood run cold. They showed what appeared to be me, in compromising positions with another man. But it wasn't me. It couldn't be me. "I can explain," I started, but he cut me off. "Explain what?" "How you've been cheating on me. How you've made a fool of me." His voice was rising, filled with anger and hurt. I pleaded with him, trying to make him understand that the photos were fake, that I would never cheat on him. But he wouldn't listen. He was convinced that I had betrayed him, our marriage, our family. The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, tears, and sleepless nights. I begged him to believe me, to get the photos analyzed, to give our marriage a chance. But his mind was made up. He filed for divorce, and before I knew it, my son and I were packing our things and moving out of the home we had built together. The transition to single motherhood has been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Suddenly, I was solely responsible for raising our son, managing a household, and trying to keep my career afloat. My ex does pay child support, but it's nowhere near enough to maintain the lifestyle we had before. I've had to downsize to a small apartment, cut back on expenses, and take on extra work to make ends meet. My son has been a trooper through all of this, but I can see the toll it's taking on him. He misses his dad, his old room, his friends from the neighborhood. He doesn't understand why we had to move, why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. Trying to explain the situation to him in a way that doesn't damage his relationship with his father has been a delicate balancing act. "Mommy, why can't we go back home?" he asked me one night as I tucked him into bed. My heart broke as I searched for the right words. "Sweetie, sometimes grown-ups have problems that they can't fix. But I want you to know that both Daddy and I love you very much, and that will never change. It's moments like these that make me question everything. Did I fight hard enough for our marriage? Should I have done more to prove my innocence?" But then I remind myself that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and my ex-husband's willingness to believe those photos over my word speaks volumes. Just when I thought I was starting to adjust to our new normal, another curveball came my way. Last week, I attended a charity event hosted by my ex-husband's company. I didn't want to go, but as a partner at my law firm, I was expected to make an appearance. I steeled myself for an awkward evening, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened. As I was making small talk with some colleagues, I saw my ex-husband walk in. But he wasn't alone. On his arm was a young woman, 25F, who looked like she had just stepped off a runway. They were laughing and smiling, looking every bit the perfect couple. My stomach churned as I watched them work the room, accepting congratulations from various guests. It wasn't until later in the evening that I overheard someone mention that she was my ex-husband's new fiancée. Fiancé. The word hit me like a physical blow. How could he be engaged already? We'd barely been divorced for a year. Gathering my courage, I approached them, plastering on what I hoped was a convincing smile. My ex looked uncomfortable, but he made the introductions. "This is Amber," he said, his voice strained. "Amber, this is my ex-wife." Amber gave me a dazzling smile, but there was something in her eyes that made me uneasy. "It's so nice to finally meet you," she gushed. "I've heard so much about you." As we exchanged pleasantries, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And then Amber dropped a bombshell. "Oh, did you know? I'm actually a family friend. Your former mother-in-law introduced us." I felt like I had been doused in ice water. My ex-mother-in-law, 60F, had never liked me, always claiming I wasn't good enough for her precious son. But to think she had a hand in setting him up with someone new so quickly after our divorce? It felt like a slap in the face. As the evening wore on, I found myself paying closer attention to the conversations around me. That's when I started noticing some odd things. Several employees were whispering about how my former mother-in-law had been showing up at the company more and more frequently. "She's always hanging around the office these days," one of them said in a hushed tone. "It's like she's trying to run the place." Another chimed in, "I heard she's been pushing for her son to give her more control over the company finances." This information set off alarm bells in my head. My ex-mother-in-law had always been interested in her son's wealth, but now it seems like she might be taking more direct action. I'm worried about how this situation might affect my son. What if she's trying to manipulate my ex-husband's assets? Could this impact the child support payments? As I drove home that night, my mind was racing. Could my ex-mother-in-law have had something to do with our divorce? Those photos that ruined our marriage, where did they really come from? And this new fiancé, conveniently introduced by her, was she part of some larger plan? I know it sounds paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more going on here than meets the eye. My ex-husband may have his faults, but he was always a dedicated father. The idea that his own mother might be manipulating him, potentially at the expense of his relationship with our son, makes my blood boil. But what can I do? If I try to warn my ex-husband, will he even listen to me? After all, he chose to believe those photos over my word once before. And if I start making accusations without proof, I'm afraid I'll come across as the bitter ex-wife, potentially jeopardizing the fragile co-parenting relationship we've managed to establish. Then there's our son to consider. He's already been through so much with the divorce. How would he handle it if his parents started fighting again? Or worse, if he found out his grandmother might be behind all of this? I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, I want to protect my son and ensure his future is secure. On the other hand, I'm not sure if I should get involved in my ex-husband's business affairs. Plus, I'm afraid that if I raise my concerns, I'll be seen as the bitter ex-wife who's just causing trouble. To complicate matters further, my son has been asking more questions about why Daddy has a new girlfriend. He's confused and a bit upset, and I'm not sure how to explain the situation to him in a way that won't hurt him or damage his relationship with his father. "Mommy, does this mean Daddy doesn't love us anymore?" he asked me the other day, his little face scrunched up with worry. I hugged him tight, fighting back my own tears. "No, sweetie. Daddy will always love you. Sometimes grown-ups' feelings for each other change, but that doesn't change how much we love you." But even as I said the words, I couldn't help but wonder, if my suspicions about my ex-mother-in-law are correct, how might that affect my son's relationship with his father and grandmother in the long run? I feel like I'm at a crossroads. Should I try to investigate further and potentially warn my ex-husband about his mother's behavior? Or should I focus on my own life and stay out of their family drama? How do I protect my son's interests without overstepping boundaries? There are nights when I lie awake, replaying every moment of my marriage, wondering if there were signs I missed. Could I have done something differently? But then I remind myself that I can't change the past. All I can do is try to make the best decisions for my son and myself moving forward. Reddit, I could really use some advice. How would you handle this situation? Am I overreacting, or are my concerns valid? And most importantly, how can I ensure my son's well-being throughout all of this? I know this post has been long, and if you've read this far, thank you. I feel like I'm navigating a minefield, and any guidance would be appreciated. How do I protect my son, potentially save my ex-husband from being manipulated, and maintain my own sanity in the process? Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my original post and offer advice. Your support and insights have been incredibly helpful during this difficult time. I have some shocking developments to share with you all, and I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. 2 days ago, I received an unexpected call from my ex-husband. His voice sounded strained and urgent as he asked if we could meet in person. Curious and admittedly a bit apprehensive, I agreed to see him at a quiet cafe near my apartment. When I arrived, I barely recognized the man sitting at the corner table. My ex-husband, usually impeccably groomed and confident, looked disheveled and exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly as he clutched a manila envelope. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse. I don't even know where to begin. I sat down across from him, my heart racing. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a deep breath and pushed the envelope towards me. "Open it," he said quietly. With shaking hands, I pulled out the contents, a stack of photographs. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized them. They were the same photos that had destroyed our marriage a year ago, the ones that supposedly showed me cheating. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at him in confusion. "Why are you showing me these again?" His eyes met mine, filled with regret and pain. "Because I made a terrible mistake. These photos, they're fake. Completely fabricated." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as his words sank in. "What?" I whispered, barely able to form the word. He ran a hand through his hair, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "I found them at my mother's house last week. I was helping her clean out some old storage, and I came across this envelope hidden in the back of her closet." My mind was reeling. "Your mother? But why would she have these?" "That's what I couldn't figure out at first," he continued. "So I took them without her knowing and had them analyzed by a professional photographer friend of mine. He confirmed what I think, deep down, I always knew but was too blind to see: they're photoshopped. Expertly done, but fake nonetheless." I sat back in my chair, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. Relief that my innocence was finally proven, warred with anger at having been doubted in the first place. "Why didn't you believe me when I told you they were fake?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hung his head in shame. "I was an idiot. I let my insecurities and my mother's influence cloud my judgment. She had been hinting for months that you might be unfaithful, that you were too focused on your career to be a good wife and mother. When those photos appeared, it seemed to confirm everything she'd been saying." As he spoke, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. My ex-mother-in-law's constant criticism, her not-so-subtle attempts to drive a wedge between us, and now these fabricated photos, it all pointed to a deliberate scheme. "Do you think your mother created these photos?" I asked, hardly believing the words coming out of my mouth. He nodded grimly. I'm almost certain of it. And I'm afraid it's just the tip of the iceberg. Over the next hour, my ex-husband laid out a disturbing pattern of manipulation and deceit orchestrated by his mother. He told me about the increasing pressure she'd been putting on him to give her more control over his company finances. He mentioned how she had pushed him to start dating again almost immediately after our divorce, introducing him to his current fiancée. "I've been such a fool," he said, burying his face in his hands. "I let her manipulate me, destroy our family, all for her own gain." As I listened to him, I felt a mix of vindication and horror. On one hand, I was relieved that the truth about the photos had finally come to light. On the other, I was appalled at the lengths my ex-mother-in-law had gone to in order to separate us. "What about your fiancée?" I asked, remembering the young woman I'd met at the charity event. "Is she part of this scheme too?" He shook his head uncertainly. "I don't know. I've been too afraid to confront her yet. But given how my mother introduced us and pushed for our relationship to move quickly, I can't help but wonder if she's somehow involved." We sat in silence for a moment, both trying to process the magnitude of what we'd discovered. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "So what happens now?" My ex-husband straightened up, a determined look in his eyes. "First, I'm going to confront my mother and get to the bottom of this. I need to know the full extent of her manipulations." He paused, then added softly, "And then, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance we could try to work things out? For our son, if nothing else?" I felt my heart skip a beat at his words. A part of me wanted to say yes, to try and reclaim the family we'd lost. But another part hesitated, remembering the pain and betrayal of the past year. I don't know," I said honestly. "A lot has happened. I need time to process all of this." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, I'll focus on unraveling my mother's scheme and protecting our son's interests." As we parted ways, my mind was reeling from everything I'd learned. The truth I'd been fighting for had finally come to light, but it had opened up a whole new set of problems and questions. Now, I find myself at another crossroads. Should I help my ex-husband expose his mother's manipulations? Is there any hope of reconciliation for our family, or has too much damage been done? And how do I explain all of this to our son, who's already been through so much? I'm worried about the potential fallout from confronting my ex-mother-in-law. If she was willing to go to such lengths to break up our marriage, what might she do when cornered? Reddit, I could use your advice once again. How should I proceed? Should I consider giving our marriage another chance, or is it better to move forward separately but with the truth now known? How do I protect my son through all of this? Any thoughts or suggestions would be greatly appreciated. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, and I'm not sure which way to step. Update 2. Hey Reddit, I'm back with another update on my situation. First off, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice on my last post. You guys have been incredibly helpful during this crazy time, and I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through this without you. So, a lot has happened since I last wrote. My ex and I have been working together to uncover the full extent of his mother's manipulations, and let me tell you, it's been a wild ride. We've been careful not to tip her off, but what we've discovered is pretty shocking. We've been going through old emails and financial records, and it's become clear that his mother's scheme goes back years. She's been slowly trying to gain control of my ex's company for a long time. We even found a draft contract on my ex's computer that would have given her significant control over the company's finances, disguised as a family trust arrangement. My ex vaguely remembers her trying to get him to sign something like this a few months ago, but he brushed it off as routine paperwork at the time. "I can't believe how blind I've been," my ex said to me one night, his voice filled with a mix of anger and disbelief. "She's been playing the long game all this time, and I never saw it." But here's where it gets really crazy. My ex's fiancée, Amber? Turns out, she's been in on it the whole time. My ex confronted her with our suspicions, and she broke down and confessed everything. She's not actually the daughter of a family friend, she's a struggling actress that my ex-Mil met at a yoga class. My ex-Mil recruited her to pretend to be from a wealthy family, seduce my ex, and help manipulate him into signing over control of his company. I know, it sounds like something out of a soap opera, right? But it gets even wilder. Amber's been secretly recording her conversations with my ex-Mil, thinking it might protect her if things went south. These recordings are pretty damning. In one of them, you can clearly hear my ex-Mil outlining her plan to take control of the company and start siphoning off funds. Once he signs those papers, we'll have him right where we want him, her voice crackles through the recording. Then we can start siphoning off funds, and he'll be none the wiser. We've been going through all of this evidence, financial records, emails, text messages, you name it. It's a lot to process, and my ex is really struggling with it all. I mean, can you imagine finding out your own mother orchestrated the destruction of your marriage and tried to steal your company? It's heavy stuff. How could I have been so stupid, he asked me one night, his voice breaking. I let her destroy our family, our marriage. I find myself in the strange position of comforting the man who doubted me so deeply just a year ago. We were both manipulated, I told him. The important thing is that we know the truth now. Our son has started to notice that something's up. He's been asking why his dad and I have been spending so much time together. We're trying to keep things as normal as possible for him, but I know we'll need to have a conversation with him soon. It's hard to know how to explain something like this to a 7-year-old. Meanwhile, my ex-Mil seems to be getting suspicious. She's been calling my ex more often, asking questions about the company finances and his relationship with Amber. We're trying to gather evidence without tipping her off, but it feels like walking a tightrope. She asked about the trust agreement again today, my ex told me after one of her calls. I think she's starting to realize something's not right. So now we're faced with some tough decisions. Do we confront her directly? Take legal action? And what does all of this mean for my ex and me? I mean, the truth has come out, but can we ever really rebuild the trust that was broken? Part of me just wants to walk away from all this drama. I've worked hard to build a new life for myself and my son, and the thought of getting tangled up in my ex's family issues again is exhausting. But another part of me knows I can't just stand by and let this woman continue to manipulate and hurt people. And then there's our son to think about. How do we protect him from his grandmother's manipulations without completely cutting her out of his life? He loves her, despite everything, and I worry about how this will affect him. Mommy, why can't we visit Grandma anymore? He asked me the other day. It broke my heart to see the confusion in his eyes. I could really use some advice here, Reddit. How would you handle this situation? Should we confront my ex-Mil directly, or keep gathering evidence? And how do we navigate this mess for the sake of our son? There's also the question of my relationship with my ex. Working together on this has brought up a lot of old feelings, but I'm scared to even think about going down that road again. Can you ever really rebuild trust after something like this? Thanks in advance for your help. You guys have been a real lifeline through all of this. I'll try to respond to comments when I can, but things are pretty hectic right now. I appreciate any insights you can offer. Update 3. Hey Reddit, I'm back with what might be my final update on this wild situation. First off, I want to thank everyone who's been following along and offering advice. Your support has meant more than you know during this crazy time. So, a lot has happened since my last update. The confrontation with my ex-Mil went down, and let me tell you, it was intense. We had set everything up carefully. Amber, my ex's former fiancée, agreed to meet with my ex-Mil at a local cafe, while we listened in from a van parked nearby. Yeah, I know, it sounds like something out of a bad spy movie, but desperate times, right? At first, everything was going according to plan. My ex-Mil started talking about taking control of the company, saying things like, once we get control, we'll be set for life. That son of mine won't know what hit him." I could see my ex flinch at those words, and I instinctively reached out to squeeze his hand. But then, things went off the rails. My ex-Mil suddenly became suspicious of Amber's questions. Before we knew it, she was causing a scene in the cafe. My ex made a split-second decision and rushed in there. I followed close behind, my heart pounding. What followed was a scene I never thought I'd witness. My ex-Mil, realizing she was cornered, began to rant, inadvertently confessing to everything: the faked photos, the manipulation, the scheme to take over the company. It was all captured on the recording devices we had in place. "I did it all for you," she cried to my ex, her eyes blazing. "Everything I did was to protect you from her." She jabbed a finger in my direction. In the aftermath of that confrontation, we've been dealing with the fallout. We pressed charges against my ex-Mil for her fraudulent actions. The legal process has been grueling, to say the least. We've had countless meetings with our lawyer, going over every piece of evidence we've gathered. The recordings from the confrontation, the paper trail of financial documents, the testimonies from Amber and other employees, it's all being compiled into what our lawyer calls an airtight case. Based on the evidence we have, our lawyer told us in our last meeting, "I'm confident we can prove not only the financial fraud but also the intentional infliction of emotional distress." Your ex-mother-in-law is looking at some serious charges here. It's a relief to know that justice is being served, but it doesn't undo all the hurt she's caused. The court proceedings are set to begin in a few months, and I'm not looking forward to having to relive everything on the witness stand. But if it means protecting others from going through what we did, it's worth it. Our son has been struggling to understand why he can't see his grandmother. It's been heartbreaking to watch him try to process all of this. We've enrolled him in therapy to help him cope with everything that's happened. His therapist suggested we be honest with him in an age-appropriate way, so we've been having a lot of difficult conversations. "But why did Grandma do bad things?" he asked during one of these talks, his little face scrunched up in confusion. I pulled him close, fighting back tears. "Sometimes, sweetie, even grown-ups make big mistakes. Grandma forgot that love is more important than money, and she hurt a lot of people because of that. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It's going to be a long journey, but we're determined to support him every step of the way." His therapist has been amazing, helping him express his feelings through play and art. Slowly but surely, we're seeing progress. As for my ex and me, we've had some long, hard conversations about our future. Working together to uncover the truth has brought us closer in many ways, and I won't lie, there were moments when I wondered if we might have a second chance. The way we instinctively supported each other through this ordeal, the shared looks of understanding, the late-night talks as we pieced everything together, it all felt so familiar and comforting. But after a lot of soul-searching, we've decided that getting back together romantically isn't the right move for us or our son. Too much has happened, too much trust has been broken. We've agreed to focus on being the best co-parents we can be. "I think we're better as a team than as a couple," my ex said during one of our talks. "Let's focus on giving our son the stable, loving family he deserves, even if it looks a little different than before." I couldn't agree more. It's a bittersweet realization, but I think it's the healthiest choice for all of us. We're committed to maintaining a friendly relationship and presenting a united front for our son. We've worked out a detailed co-parenting plan with the help of a family counselor. We'll have joint custody, with our son spending alternating weeks with each of us. We've agreed to live within a certain distance of each other to make this arrangement work, and we've set up a shared calendar system to keep track of school events, doctor appointments, and extracurricular activities. The key, our counselor told us, is to keep the lines of communication open and to always put your son's needs first. It's not going to be easy, but we're both committed to making it work. As for me, I've made a big decision. I think it's time for a fresh start, away from all the drama and painful memories. I've decided to move to a new city with my son once he's a little older and more settled. It's scary to think about starting over somewhere new, but I'm also excited about the possibilities it holds. I've already started researching potential cities. I'm looking for somewhere with good schools, a strong job market in my field, and plenty of family-friendly activities. I've even joined some online forums for single parents in the cities I'm considering, trying to get a feel for the communities. My ex is supportive of the decision, even though I know it's hard for him. We've worked out a plan for him to have extended visits during school breaks and holidays. We're also looking into video chat options to make sure our son can have regular virtual dinner dates with his dad when he's with me. It's not ideal, my ex admitted when we discussed the plan. But I understand why you need this fresh start. And I'll do whatever it takes to stay involved in our son's life. I've started putting aside money for the move, and I'm brushing up on my professional skills to make myself more marketable in a new job market. It's daunting, but also exhilarating. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm taking control of my life instead of just reacting to crises. To everyone who's followed my story and offered advice along the way, thank you. Your support has meant the world to me. While this chapter of my life is closing, I'm looking forward to what the future holds. It may not be the happily ever after I once imagined, but it's a new beginning, and I'm ready for it.